Soul Simmers, and welcome back to a brand new video. I think we can all agree that the default save file that comes with The Sims 4 is not the best, especially if you've been playing for a long time. It gets a little repetitive. At the same time, it can be super incredibly daunting to make your own save file. If you have all the packs, or even if you have just a few, there is so much to do. So many families, so many builds, etc. But don't fright. I have a list of amazing tips for you today that will help you massively in making the task less daunting and feeling super in control when making your own save file for The Sims while not losing your creative energy to do so. At the end of the video, I'll even give you some insights on how I kept track on making my own save file, and I'll show you some of the best features of that save file so you can take some inspiration. So make sure to stick around for that, but don't worry, there is a lot of good value in between because all the 11 tips that I'm about to give you today, use them to your own benefits, and making a save file will be easy and fun. This video took a long time to make, so feel free to give it a cheeky like. I very much appreciate it. And without further ado, let's get into the video. Tip number 1 is to actually start off with an empty save file. It saves you an incredible amount of time if you don't have to delete all of the pre-made sims and pre-made builds. This can literally take up a day if you don't have an empty save file, and there are people who have already done this. I added a download link to my favorite, which is called the Seriously Blank save file. It is completely free to download, and all you have to do is drag and drop it into your save files folder on your PC. This save files folder can be found in your Documents, Electronic Arts, The Sims 4 Saves. All you need to do is just grab the file that you downloaded, drop it in that folder, and that way it will be automatically loaded into your game as soon as you start up, and you have an empty save file to start working with. Tip number 2 is as soon as you start making builds, families, etc., keep a record. I will show an example of the record that I kept at the end of the video, but just find a way that works for you. Just make sure that you register the amount of sims you've made, the kids, the pets, the type of buildings, the price of the buildings. And this all sounds like a lot of work, but actually you're gonna save yourself a lot of work or brain pain down the line. The reason for this being is that there are so many lots, so many families, and you want to make a balanced save file. If you just start creating off the bat, you don't really think about it, and you just don't write it down, you'll probably end up with a save file that only has families and no singles, or only has very expensive builds and no starter homes. Maybe you even forget to leave certain lots empty, and you'll be left with a save file where you constantly have to demolish things if you just want to play, for instance, rags to riches on an empty lot. The reason why writing everything down sounds like a lot of work is because I can imagine it can be a little bit of a struggle to start with what do I need to register and what do I need to think about. Therefore, I've also made sure to link an empty Excel file in the description. It is based off the one that I used. You can download it for free. You can use it to your heart's content, so you are also allowed to download it and then just adjust it. But I listed the most important things and kind of already built some Excel logic into it so that if you fill it in while working on it, the dashboard should update automatically and you should not experience any struggles or challenges when making your own save file. Tip number 3 is to use mods, which is obviously, I know, not something that everyone can do, but if you're open to using mods, I can highly recommend using both MC Command Center and UI cheats. The reason for this is with MC Command Center, you can actually give your sims skills. So as soon as you've made a household, you can go into MC Command Center and you can click around and actually assign skills to your sims. And when you do that, your sims will get like a level 1 of that skill. This way you can actually give your sims some skills ahead, like cooking and stuff, because to me, it doesn't make any sense that most adult sims in my saves do not have any skills. Because they've lived through their entire teenage and young adult years, so why not have cooking skill or maybe gardening? I also like to give them skills that work with their jobs, etc. This is, however, a little bit of work, so you have to be up for the task. But if you really like storytelling and you really like creating sims, I think this is one of the steps that you might actually most enjoy about making a save file. I then use UI cheats to actually skill them up, like make sure that the cooking is not a level 1, but I change it to, I don't know, maybe a level 4 or 5. And also I use this to already level them up in their career. So not all of my sims are like at level 1 of the career, but they are actually already maybe at level 4 or something. So that if you meet a sim and you start dating them, it's not like they just appeared out of thin air, but they actually have a little bit of a backstory. Speaking of backstories, that is a very nice bridge into tip number 4, which is to give your Sims some backstories. The Sims has this great way of actually allowing you to type a little bit of a backstory at each household. You can do this through the household manager, but you can also do it by clicking on a house if a family already lives there, and then you can just type out a little backstory. I really like to do this because it helps me think about what type of sim lives there. I prefer to even write the backstory before even making the sims. I just copy and paste it into my game at a later point. But the reason for doing this is because it gives me some handles onto what clothing to give them, how many kids they have, if they have any pets, and also what kind of house they live in. For instance, if you have a very minimalistic sim, you might give them a completely different home compared to when you have a very extroverted maximalist sim. Also, if you have a family home, all of these things, if you think about it up front, it will massively help you. For instance, in our save file, we have this really cute household that apparently traveled the world with their kids. So their entire house is filled with paintings that kind of signify their pictures from all over the world. And just having this little hook will help you a lot in staying creative into making many, many builds for one save file. Tip number 5, I kind of mentioned it already, but that is to make the family before the builds. Or even think about your neighborhoods and think about what kind of families or what kind of types of sims you want to have living there. We, for instance, created this really rich neighborhood in Willow Creek where we made one house the mayor house and all their houses around it are also these really big fancy villas. We also have a beautiful farming district where we just have a bunch of farms sitting next to each other. And the reason we were able to make this work, and I keep saying we because I didn't make my save file by myself, I made it with my best friend, which was a super fun project. This is a bonus tip in between, so keep your eyes and ears open. Do it with someone together. If you have a friend or a family member or someone, if you're part of a Sims community, find people who want to build it with you. It gives a little bit of a logistic challenge for like having to upload things to the gallery so that other people can download them. Because in essence, you're building 2 separate save files. You're just using each other's builds and families. But honestly, it was so much fun to share this whole process with my best friend and to kind of bounce off each other's creative ideas. So if you know someone who also plays The Sims, I highly recommend not doing it alone. But basically, this really helped us to kind of make the families or the strategies for each neighborhood before we started building, because that way our neighborhoods looked cohesive, which is a massive one-up from the default save file in The Sims, because it doesn't really look cohesive to me. The builds are kind of just plopped randomly. I feel like every world has a different style mixed in together in neighborhoods, and I really like that in my own save file things are a little bit more consistent and there's actually a theme to each neighborhood. So I highly recommend thinking about your strategies and your families before you start building. Tip number 6, if you don't count the bonus tip, is to actually use the club system from Get Together if you own that expansion pack to make clubs for your Sims far beyond the default clubs that are already in the game. For instance, we have a Fishing for Friends club in our save file, which is basically just all of the Sims that live in our save file that are interested in fishing. And they are basically in that club together. There are 2 empty spots. So if you start playing with a sim who is into nature or outdoor activities, you can join this club, and it's like a friend club for outdoor activities. We set up these clubs with all the approved activities or age group limits. We also have a scouts group for our kids. We even have Singles as Pringles as a club, which is basically a club that you can join to easily meet some of the singletons in our save file. These things make such a massive difference when doing gameplay in our save file, because all of our Sims actually know people already. Because as soon as you join a club, all of those Sims that are in the club will actually appear in the friendship panel. And then again with UI cheats, I give them a little bit more friendship, or sometimes even cheat some romance between 2 Sims in a club, because eventually that is kind of realistic in real life as well. If you meet new people at work, they probably have a friend group, or they're probably part of a family with a backstory and a history. So we try to give as many levels to all of our Sims as possible, so that if you play in the save, they actually feel like Sims that have their own lives and the save file feels alive, if that makes any sense. Tip number 7 is not necessarily a tip, but more or less something that we found out the frustrating way is that the game, no matter how hard you try, will generate townies. You cannot stop this. There are jobs like bartenders, or the ones that man the stalls at the market in, what is that world called again? Like the British inspired world where you have Agnes Crumplebottom hitting you with the bag. I keep forgetting world names these days. It's terrible. But all of those places need to be manned. And even if you have a bunch of Sims that do not have a job, that don't live anywhere, the game will, for some reason, not take those Sims and use them. They will still generate townies with very weird outfits to man those jobs. The best you can do is all the way at the end, if you've finished everything in your save file and you feel very happy with the look and the feel and the amount of families that you have. Play a little bit in it. I would say like maybe 2 or 3 days in game. Visit as many public places as you can, because that will actually trigger the game to generate all of these townies. And then as the last step in your process, give all these townies a makeover. Give them a new name, maybe give them some better outfits. I don't know what you want to do with them, but basically use the ones that were created by the game itself by default, because they have already been pre-assigned that job in that little time window that you've been playing, and then you can give them a makeover. The reason I say do this all the way at the end of your save file is because if you constantly do it in between, what you basically get is that all of the things that you've already built in your save file will actually start to run. So your families will start to have lives, they might have children. You can turn autonomy and like continuous life off, obviously for non-played sims, which I highly recommend doing, by the way, when you're making a save file, because you might have to playtest some things and you don't want your families to live their life while you're building the save file. But still, I just would recommend doing it all the way at the end, because that way you are 100% sure that those random townies will generate for every world that you've been playing in, etc. So that would be my tip. Just give a makeover to the default ones that are created by the game rather than trying to create your own, because for some reason the game just doesn't accept them, and it's very, very frustrating. And we tried and we wasted a lot of time on this. So take it from me, don't waste your time, just use the ones and give them a makeover. Tip number 8 is again something that I did not do and I wish I had done, and that is to work one world at a time. The reason I'm saying this is because if you finish the entirety of Willow Creek, you can actually create a copy of that save file, which I highly recommend doing, by the way, anytime you want to play in your own save file, is to load the game, click Save As, and create a copy of your save. That way your base save always stays intact and nothing ever changes. But like by doing it world by world, you can actually, if one world is completely finished, or maybe 2 worlds are completely finished, you can already play in it. You can create a copy and you can start playing in it and see how it feels, see if you want to tweak some things. And this is such a massive game changer, because we tried to do all of the worlds at once before we started playing. We went from world to world, from family to family, and this caused us to have to work on the save file for 7 months before we could even start playing in it. And this wasn't too good for our motivation. It wasn't really helpful to feel like you constantly had to build and create families and not be able to play the game. But at the same time, we both didn't really want to start any challenges or play the game, because we felt like it didn't make any sense to play it outside of our own save file, because we were building our own save file. I highly recommend doing it world by world, because that way, even if you're halfway done, you can already kind of play in your save file, get what you like, what you don't like, maybe tweak some things in the original file, but do it world by world, and don't make the same mistake as I did and try to do all of them at once, because you are going to lose your motivation. The only reason we pulled through is because we did it together. If I had to do that alone, I would have quit probably. Tip number 9 is one that I already kind of briefly touched upon, but is think about the style of your neighborhoods. If you want to do a modern build, make sure that the houses around it also look kind of modern. Also try and pick builds that work with the surroundings in that world. And try to use landscaping or trees that you see in the world and bring them back into your build. So kind of if you use a tree that is already around your build. This one will make your builds fit in way better with all of the worlds that you're playing in, giving it far more consistency than the default save file. But also, it will make your neighborhoods really look that all of the things match up. And I think this is great for gameplay or storytelling, because your sims can kind of live in a place that fits with their personality. So you can really have an area of blue suburbans, or you can have this really modern desert home where maybe only very rich people live. I don't know, but it is great for storytelling to, in advance, kind of think about what you want. For instance, in Del Sol Valley, we have this one place where it's kind of only rundown homes. And it is the place where all of the actors who are very much not making it, but are trying to make it, are living as roommates in one household. And then obviously, all the way at the top of the hill in Del Sol Valley, we have all the big fancy home for all of the super famous families that have totally made it. And the way that we kind of like thought about this up front really decided the style that we wanted to build in for us. So that rundown neighborhood is consistently rundown. Every house that we place there looks absolute trash. It also helped us in deciding where we wanted our community lots. So for instance, our restaurants and our gyms and stuff tend to be quite close together, because in real life that would also make sense. So we almost approached the design of our maps as if we were playing city skylines. We really tried to think about the infrastructure, because yet again, if you're playing in that save file and you have that set up, it's gonna make the world feel alive and it's gonna make it feel like it makes sense. Tip number 10 is one that I think we concluded after losing half of our motivation because we struggled so much with getting through all of the world, and that is do not be afraid to use the gallery. It might be your own save file, but that doesn't have to mean that every single sim or build in the save file has to be your own. You can even completely make a save file with just families and builds from the gallery. I know that in our save file we have a bunch of like community lots, like a bowling alley and a restaurant, because even if you work with the two of you, you might be able to build 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 restaurants, but at one point you're just done building restaurants. But at the same time, we wanted to have every world to have a restaurant that also fit the style. So we ended up downloading this super cute ramen bar in Mount Komorebi. And now our Sims can actually have food in a place that fits with the environment, that is super cute, very well decorated, far better than the one that we have by default in game, but at the same time, it doesn't have like the limitation of, or like the pressure of us having to build it. So I highly recommend, if you're daunted by the task of starting a save file, just every time you're on the gallery and you see something you like, save it to your library. Because even if you start the process of making your save file in 6 months and you're not ready for it now, every time that you save a build that you like, you will be able to go back to that and like place it in your save file as soon as you start building it. And then tip number 11, again, one that I already kind of mentioned, but I'm gonna mention it again because I cannot stretch the importance of this one. If you feel like your save file is ready to play, do 2 things. 1, if you play in it in the game, make sure to save it as and create a new instance of your save file. This way, your original save file stays intact, and even if your game at one point gets terribly corrupted, you still have that one base version. And mentioning corrupted save files, back up your saves. Especially your save file, as soon as it is a finished product. Me and my best friend actually made a copy of that and uploaded it to a shared Google Drive, because now no matter what happens to our game, even if our game completely breaks or at one point we have to delete everything, we will be able to re-download it and place it back into our save files folder, and we have an uncorrupted, always working version of our own save file. And last but definitely not least, I promised you all the way at the end of the video, I would show you how we kept track of our save file. Like mentioned earlier, I will make sure to, probably a better looking version, but like upload a template for you to use that is based off the one that we did. And I'll link it in the description box down below so you can use it to your heart's content. But let's dive right into the Excel sheet that we use to keep track of our save file. Don't be scared, there's a lot going on here, but I'm gonna walk you through everything of it. So basically, I'm gonna start with the tab that is called Lots Done. This originally was just called Lots, but eventually we called it Done because everything was done. But this just is a list of all of the lots that you have in the game. Every single one of them. I'll make sure that in the template below, you will also have all of these lots. We also decided up front what kind of, this was just something that we decided in conversation, is like, hey, do you think that should be a rental? Do you think that should be a cafe, etc., etc.? But we decided to like write it down here as well, because that way we could keep track of how many cafes we had, how many bars we had, how many bowling alleys we had, etc., etc. We also had a status, occupied or unoccupied. This obviously was not relevant for either rentals or community lots, but this way we could see how many empty houses we had in the save, which is obviously very important, because if you want to be able to play in the save, you don't want all of the houses to be occupied already, because you want to live there too. Then we had some details, because we also had some unfurnished build in our save file, which was basically a home that you could move into, but then furnish it to your liking if you were to play with a specific family. We wrote down if the lot had any traits. We did not give every lot traits, because we felt that that wasn't very realistic, because sometimes traits give a lot so many buffs that it almost feels like it's cheating, but some of them have traits. We also have some of them that have a description if we felt like a particular build had a very specific backstory, especially the empty builds. We wrote it down so that if the other person, because obviously we both made builds, if the other person made a build with like a thought behind it or an intent, that way we could actually read it up, and then you could see which builds had a description. We also listed the value. This was mainly important to decide how many starter homes we would want. As you can see, for the apartments, it wasn't very relevant, because obviously those are places that you rent, but every single build had a value in, and this was also to make sure that, for instance, not all of the builds were far over 2K. So you can see here we have one for 144, 244k, but also one of 19. So that way we could very easily filter out which ones were starter homes and if we had enough or if we wanted more of those. Then for households, we had a list of all the households that we made. And we listed how many Sims there were in the household, how many pets there were in the household, where they live, what lot they lived on, what type of family it was, because we didn't just want singletons or families. We also wanted to make sure that we had roommates, that we had some really big families, some really small families. The status is what we used when it wasn't done yet, so it is now empty because every time one was done, we emptied it. And then as you can see, we have all of these family descriptions that we made that kind of told the backstory of that family or our Sims. I hear you think, but how am I going to balance out having enough teens, having enough kids, etc. if you just list the amount of Sims? Well, that's where this list comes into play. And unfortunately, this was not linked. We did everything manually. I was not an Excel wizard back then. I'm not claiming to be one right now, but at least I know a little bit more, so I might be able to, if I can, link some things in the template. I will try to do my best. This is basically all of our Sims, every single one. And the reason we did this, because I can hear you think through my screen, oh my dear Lord, why would you do this? This is so much work. But this way, we could keep track of having a balance between male and female Sims. We could keep track if we had enough Sims versus pets. We could keep track of all the age groups that we had to make sure that we had enough kids, young adults, teens, etc. We could make sure that there were not too many Sims living in one world. For instance, if you place all of your big families in Willow Creek is going to feel incredibly crowded. But if you place all of your singletons in Newcrest, that world is going to feel very empty. So this way we were able to kind of balance it out. We also noted if they were in a club or not, because obviously we wanted to make sure that as many of our Sims are part of a club, because that gives them some sort of friend group or backstory. We wrote down what their relationship was. Again, we wanted to make sure that we had a balance between either couples, singles, or married, because that way your save file feels really balanced. And we wrote down if they had a career or not, because obviously you don't want to have a save file with 500 astronauts and no chefs. This had the whole list of each Sim, and it was very nice. For instance, you could filter on young adults and adults, because those are the age group that usually have careers, and you could fill them in for those career groups. So doing it in Excel allowed us to kind of filter on the information that we needed at the time. This all boiled down to our main overview, which kind of showed our world and how many percentage of it was done. That was kind of a estimated percentage. So if we had done 50% of the builds in the houses, we just write 50%. But it was kind of to just keep track on how far we were. Then we could also see how many households we had, how many Sims we had, how many pets we had, how many lots were done, and how many lots we still needed to do. That was all based on the statuses in all of the separate lists. As you can see, you also have clubs Roos and clubs Steph. That's basically because we decided to make different clubs, because you cannot upload clubs to the gallery. We both needed to do them manually anyways. So we both have a different list of clubs, and I went a bit further in how many clubs I made than my best friend. She kind of kept it a bit more simple, but that's why we have separate tabs, but those don't really show up on our dashboard. Also, you can see some Dutch in here because both of us are Dutch, but basically what it meant was we listed all of the careers that we have, and we listed how many of these were present, because again, eventually the whole goal of this was to make a balanced save file. That if you play in this save file, that you feel like there is enough of everything. You feel like you can meet different Sims with a lot of different careers, with a lot of different traits, with a lot of different backstories, that there are enough singles, enough married couples, enough elders, so that if you play here, everything truly feels balanced out. Fun fact, if you see this, if you watch the entire video and you think, I think that after watching this, I feel less motivated to actually make my own save file, don't fright. My save file is completely available to download, or I should call it my save file. It's basically me and my best friend's save file. It is available for download. However, we did make this in like 2019, so some of their more recent expansion packs don't have any builds to them. So if you place it in your game, that will actually be replaced with the default EA version, which kind of could be a fun thing for you to do, to download our save file and then just the last 2 or 3 worlds kind of change it to your own liking and make it in a way that it is yours, but still you don't have to do all the worlds. I made sure to also link our save file in the description box down below. Like mentioned, it is completely free to download. If you do end up playing in it, I would love to hear what is your favorite build, what is your favorite sim, what is your favorite story or neighborhood. Please let me know in the comments down below. If you watched it up until this point in the video, thank you so much for listening to all my rambling. I hope it was useful to you. If it was, don't forget to give the video a really big like. And also, if you're interested in more Sims videos, I'm playing my own Let's Play, and I'm actually doing a bunch of videos on mods, CC, and building tutorials over on my YouTube channel, so feel free to check it out. And if you like what you see, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. And with all of that out of the way, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye, everyone!